Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. As always, I appreciate you. So this video is a little different and I'm sure unexpected, but for those who haven't seen the news, Sharron Pryor's case has been solved. I wanted to make an update video to just explain how this came about and who this man was who decided to take this bright young girl's life. It's a bittersweet thing to report, but for the sake of keeping everyone up to date, I ask you to join me as we remember Sharron Pryor once more. Originally, we were introduced to Sharron's case in January of 2022, but I wanted to add a quick recap for those who haven't seen it since it was originally uploaded. Sharron Pryor was a 16-year-old girl from Montreal, Canada who disappeared Easter weekend in 1975 after making plans to meet friends at a local pizzeria called Marina's. Marina's was located just 5 blocks from her home, which was on Congregation Street in the neighborhood of Point St. Charles. The pizzeria was a place most teenagers went, and Sharron often met with her friends. She said goodbye to her mother before crossing the street and heading towards the establishment. March 29, 1975 was the last time her family saw her alive. Tragically, 3 days after Sharron went missing, her body was discovered on April 1, 1975. In a snow-covered field in the city of Longueuil. She was partially nude, beaten horrifically, and assaulted before being left to die. Her cause of death was due to aspirating her own blood. For 48 years, Sharron's case sat cold, but they never stopped, mostly due to the persistence of the Pryor family. It was revealed on May 23, 2023, that after nearly 5 decades, Sharron's case finally came to a close in a very unlikely place. During the search for Sharron's murder, Sergeant Roscoe revealed over the course of the investigation a total of 122 subjects of interest were investigated, with 40 being excluded by DNA and another 60 being written off by methods of wiretap and other situations, such as being incarcerated at the time of Sharron's death. They served 4 different search warrants in Point St. Charles, but nothing came from any of this. Between the years of 1975 to 1976, 31 of the persons of interest were detained and interrogated, but again, no results. Luckily, back in 1975, during the crime scene investigation, officers took various pieces of clothing, including a blue shirt used to bind Sharron's hands, her pants, and her underwear. They were all taken into evidence and stored until DNA technology could advance enough to produce a reliable profile. In 2003, DNA testing was advancing. A partial profile was lifted from the blue shirt, but it was insufficient at the time to make a comparison. But in 2015, the forensics lab in Montreal were able to lift a complete DNA profile from the shirt, which they could then use to compare to the other samples from Sharron's clothes, which came back as a match. At the time, the DNA was ran through the Canadian database, but it did not match a known profile. 2 years later, on the suggestion of a biologist in the lab, the forensics lab in Canada approached a private lab in the United States to search for possible matches, or maybe even relatives, and they agreed. But initially nothing came through. By 2022, Sergeant Roscoe, who was heading Sharron's cold case investigation, decided to send the items of clothing to the lab as direct samples in hopes of getting some kind of update, and miraculously, they got a hit. For the first time in the investigation, they were given the last name of Romine. It turned out someone from the suspect's family submitted their DNA to a genealogy website, and in turn a match was made. No one with the name Romine was included on the original persons of interest, so Sergeant Roscoe got to work. He scoured public databases to try and pinpoint a Romine in Montreal around the time Sharron was murdered. After his exhaustive research, he finally corroborated the profile with a potential suspect, Franklin Maywood Romine. Franklin Romine was born around 1946 and had a criminal record dating back to his childhood. Originally from West Virginia, he spent many of his years in and out of jail for a multitude of crimes. On 2 occasions, he even broke out of prison. In February of 1974, Franklin committed his worst crime to date. He broke into the home of a woman in Parkersburg, where he assaulted her before fleeing. He was arrested shortly after, but released on a $2,500 bond. 2 months after his release, he moved to Canada, where he continued to commit crimes. In October of 1975, Franklin was captured by Canadian officials and handed over to the FBI to be extradited back to West Virginia on his robbery and assault charges from 1974. In April of 1981, he pled guilty to second-degree assault in exchange for his robbery charge to be dropped. Franklin was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison, but released soon after with credit for time served. Once released, he moved back to Canada in 1982, where he died in Montreal of unknown causes at the age of 36. His body was returned back to his mother in West Virginia, where he was buried in Pine Grove Cemetery. With a name match, approximate location, and a criminal record, Sergeant Roscoe decided to pursue Franklin as a suspect by reaching out to his family. Franklin's two brothers, Noah and Michael, willingly provided DNA samples in December of 2022, which were compared to the profiles on the clothing. Comparison of these samples showed several similarities between them and the evidence found. The results produced that it was 140 million times more likely to come from their brother than any other random person in the Caucasian population. One of his brothers remarked he felt it was most likely Franklin who committed the murder. Allegedly, Franklin was not close to his family after he attempted to assault his brother's wife. With the DNA and extensive record to prove that Franklin ticked all of the boxes, Sergeant Roscoe approached the West Virginia Sheriff's Department to request Franklin be exhumed. Putnam County willingly helped Canadian authorities by pushing through the request, where a hearing was set. Franklin's family, however, were opposed to him being exhumed due to a number of reasons. One of the reasons was their Pentecostal faith. His brothers stated they believed it to be sacrilegious to disturb a person's body. Since they already had the DNA, they didn't feel it was necessary to go through all of the hassle. Lastly, due to their finances and tradition, they chose to dig their own graves. They stated they made a space error when burying Franklin and their mother, and due to the close proximity of Franklin, he couldn't be exhumed without their mother having to be removed as well. The brothers were willing to go on to say that Franklin was guilty, so authorities could provide closure for the family. The judge heard Sergeant Roscoe's evidence against Franklin Romine for nearly an hour to persuade him why exhumation was so important. He stated they needed to confirm what they suspected. Not only did Franklin at the time live in Montreal, he lived near Sharron. Specifically, he was around 9 kilometers or 5 miles from her house. He lived on Dakari Boulevard while Sharron lived on Congregation Street. It was determined both the shoe print and tire marks found at the scene could be traced back to Franklin. They suspected his foot was the same size as that found in the snow, and the tires were found to be a type that were only used on 37 models in 1975, one of which was a Wrangler, the same vehicle Franklin drove at the time. In the case of a 22-year-old woman who was almost abducted around the same time and in the same location as Sharron, provided a description of her assailant, who fit Franklin to a T. The man was described as speaking in English, which was odd since French is the language most used in Montreal. The witness stated the man who attacked her was in his late 20s, white, around 6'2", and maybe 200 pounds, with brown hair, a mustache, and a blue ski coat. But of course, these points were all circumstantial evidence since none of it could actually be pinned to Franklin. The smoking gun, so to speak, was the DNA matches from the Romine brothers. The judge ruled in favor of exhuming Franklin. He stated the DNA could be retrieved by opening his casket alone to confirm his involvement in Sharron's case. In addition to this ruling, the judge also stated the area next to Franklin's grave be protected and properly placed back for the Romine family. On May 2, 2023, Longueuil Police, FBI, West Virginia State Police, and Putnam Sheriff's Department met at Pine Grove Cemetery to exhume Franklin with the help of the local funeral home. Franklin's bones were taken back to Canada, to the National Forensics Lab, where they were able to retrieve a full genetic profile. This profile was then compared to the suspect's profile, where they confirmed without a doubt Franklin left that DNA at the scene. After 48 years, Sharron's case has now been solved. The Pryor family played a critical role in advocating Sharron's case, They didn't want her to be forgotten. They helped provide research and worked alongside Canadian authorities through every step of the way. Their pursuit of justice was a key factor in closing out this case. Yvonne Pryor, Sharron's mother, declined to comment during the May 23, 2023 conference, but her two sisters, Maureen and Doreen, thanked the many people who helped find the killer. They spent moments reflecting on the type of person Sharron was, as well as describing her as a beautiful young lady with a heart of gold. They are forever grateful for the miraculous science that brought them some peace of mind. During their closing out statements, both sisters shared some final sentiments. The solving of Sharron's case will never bring Sharron back, but knowing that her killer is no longer on this earth and won't kill anymore brings us to somewhat of closure. You never came back to our house on Congregation Street that weekend, but you have never left our hearts, and you never will. We love you, Sharron. May you now truly rest in peace. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I just want to say I'm glad Sharron's case has come to a close. Although we never knew Sharron, we definitely won't forget her, and I can only hope this is the beginning of closing many more cold cases in the future. Thank you so much for joining me for this special video. I hope you found it to be informative and hopeful. Let Sharron be just the beginning. But for now, I will see you all in the next one, which I hope to have up here in the next few days after this one's uploaded. So for now, stay safe out there, and I will see you then. Bye, friends.